Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. I don't think I'm on, but
You are.
it's official time for start. It's 10:04. How's that? Yeah. Have a sit and open your Bibles. Good to see everybody this morning. Got a good group on this frosty morning. So, if you will, we're in James, if you all remember that. And we basically, as soon as I get my Bible open, I walked in a minute ago, and after talking with everybody, I started just to sit down, and I remembered, wait, I'm supposed to be up here. So we finished up last week with James chapter 12. I'm sorry, James chapter 12. If you have that, we have a problem. James chapter 3, verse 12 is where we ended up last week. And if you remember, we're talking about the tongue and how deadly the tongue is. How, it would be really scary to think about how many times we've said the wrong thing, and now somebody may never find Christ. We've got to be careful. Even if we're not talking about Christ to somebody, just the way we talk around town, the way we live our life, people are going to see that. This next section of verses that we're going to deal with, quite hard to really read and examine what they're saying, what James is telling. Like I said, he doesn't pull much punches at all. And this next section should be sobering to all of us. The first question he starts out with in verse 13 is, who is wise and understanding among you? Anybody wise and understanding here? We're working on it. We can be somewhat wise and we can be understanding. But you ever notice somebody, I went to school with somebody, and some of you may know him, so I won't mention his name. But he had a very high IQ. He couldn't throw a ball 4 feet, but he can finish a calculus test in 15 minutes. So he would always brag on that, how smart he was. And during class, I had him in calculus, and one of the quizzes was, finish as much as you can in the 45 minutes. And about 25 minutes into it, I'm done. Well, see, that's the opposite of what James is about to tell us. When you look at this, there's two things he says here: wise and understanding. How do those go together? How does wise and understanding go together? We both know what being wise is. The older you get, hopefully the wiser we get. We've been there and done that. Now, not in everything, but some of us more than others. But we're wise with age, and wisdom. Yeah.
I think sometimes understanding is contextual.
Okay.
The situation, you have to say the right thing at the right time. And even if you have the right thing that you're saying, if you say it at a point that is not receptive to get the desired effect, you can damage people.
Right.
So I think being wise isn't the only thing. We can have all the knowledge and the Bible understanding, but if you don't relay it in an effective, appropriate time, it can be really bad.
And that's where the understanding comes in. You can have the knowledge or the wisdom or be wise in the things you're saying, but the understanding is understanding your situation you're in. In other words, if you're dealing with somebody with a major problem, and all you want to do is tell them how wrong they are, is that being understanding? No, and that's going to alienate, and that's not being wise. Now, you may be saying the right thing, but you need to understand the situation you're in. Because the ultimate goal is that we bring others to Christ and not build a wall or a barrier. You know, we just talked about the tongue, about teaching, and that's where the tongue comes in. Teaching somebody and not saying the right thing, misleading them, how devastating that can be to people. And now he goes in and talks about who is wise and understanding. So let's see what he answers this. He says, by his conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom. Obviously, going back to chapter 2, James spends a lot of time talking about faith without works is dead. So we have to have works. And here, the two key words here is meekness, and then he brings up wisdom. So whatever we do, if we're in wise, let us show it by our meekness. Let us show it by our wisdom. And wisdom is the knowledge of being able to do things and understand it in one form. Yeah, Lyle.
Ask.
What'd you say?
Ask them where they're at in their spirituality would help to get the wisdom from them.
Right, when you're at that point, right.
And then seek it within God, you know.
Right.
And that's what I was kind of, that refrained from me to where, hey, if you ask, you want to get answers. You might
Communication,
get
huh? Yeah.
education from them.
So here he says, by good conduct. What does that mean? Not enough to be wise, not enough to be understanding, but we've got to have good conduct, Paul?
Good conduct in a biblical sense is that which always accomplishes God's purpose in their lives.
Right. Yeah, Gene.
And it goes back to, you know, you show your faith by your works, and this is where, you know, by your good conduct. And when it's good, because you can have all kinds of conduct, but it's good conduct. Like you said, it's that application. You know, and that's, you know, it's where the middle meets the road, the pedal, you know, it's, if people see how you live, they're more likely to listen to you. But if they don't see their conduct as being something they think's positive, they're not going to even want to hear what you have to say.
Exactly.
Even if you say the right thing.
Yes, and isn't that kind of the theme of our Christianity throughout the Bible? We are to be a good example. We're not to be a know-it-all. We're not to judge people where the Bible doesn't judge people.
Or put a good face, so to speak, on the gospel.
Exactly. We need to be Christ-like. Christ-like met with people that nobody else would want to meet with.
The American Standard kind of renders it a little different, I think, a little stronger. It says, let him show his good life, his good works, and meekness and wisdom. So it's not a one-time thing.
Right.
It's a lifetime of using wisdom and knowledge properly.
Good point. And it is. It's not something we just do every now and then. It's got to be who we are. How many times the Bible says that we need to be in Christ or Christ-like? Was Christ who he was every now and then in the scriptures? Or did he act like that the whole 3 years he was here? Or in his mission, yeah.
It says meekness of wisdom.
Of wisdom.
He's telling you the very character of being wise is
Right.
being meek. If it's wise, you don't have to be haughty and heavy-handed about it.
And
And I hope that my version has gentleness instead of meekness. The word gentle is power under control. And whenever you think about gentleness being that way, it's not being, you know, a milquetoast or letting, you know, everything roll over. It takes great strength to truly be gentle. And to combine it, the gentleness of wisdom, that's where that power under control comes from, is the wisdom. It teaches us how to be in control.
And that's a good point. Our part of being wise is part of understanding that you need to treat people a little different. I mean, a lot of times people who think they're wise, what's their attitude? I'm better than you. I'm better than you. I had a neighbor. In the times we lived across the street from him, I could not tell you how many times he reminded me he had a PhD. You think I'm kidding? I heard it all the time. He could not get his front yard to grow. And so I'd explain to him that he's not watering long enough. That's all it needed. Because we got very hot when we were living in Southern California. He wasn't. He was watering 15 minutes a station with rainbirds. That ain't going to do it. In the time we lived there, he tore up his grass, redid the sprinklers twice. And all he needed to do was water longer. But when I would try to tell them, you don't have a PhD, I do. His PhD wasn't in horticulture, though, obviously. But see, people can take, you can take that, but I'm better than you because of what I know, and that's going to alienate people. See, that was a problem in the church back in the 50s and early 60s. They went around with this thing, we're the only ones going to be saved. And when you start talking that way and teaching people that way, what happens? You draw a wall. You build a wall up between you and them. And that happened in the church. We've seen the decline of the membership. That is not the right way to do things. That is not how Jesus did things. So we need to be wise and understanding and show meekness, and by our conduct. It says, and then 14, here's a warning if you don't do that. The other side to this coin is, but if you have bitter jealousy, selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast and be false to the truth. So what is that? What kind of person is that? What kind of person are they talking about there?
Wasn't Jesus kind to others? Wasn't he actually saying, hey, you know, wow.
Yeah, Jesus loved everybody, didn't he?
He was kind. He was loving. He told people, he said, man, I wish you were with me.
Right. So in this case, James is talking, he's talking the opposite of somebody. Yeah, Jill?
Well, I was just thinking, if you back up into that, when we think about meekness and gentleness, basically it's that power under control. Jesus was powerful, but he had it under control, right? He could have used his power for a lot of things. And then if people can claim that they're wise, but if they have these characteristics that you're going into now, it shows that they're not.
Right. One of the things, remember when we think of wise, think of two different things, discreet and well-informed. Discreet and well-informed. So here, he's talking about if you have bitter jealousy, selfish, and you're going to see this word throughout the scriptures in one form or another, selfish. Boy, that is an evil word. Because that leads to all kinds of problems. Selfishness, we've got to be careful of that. We've got to look at ourselves and make sure that our actions are not for self only. And we do that a lot. That's it. And here, not only selfish, but selfish ambition. Take it one step further in your hearts. Do not boast and be false to the truth. So here's someone, he's saying, if you are false, if you're not right with God, if you're not godly, why do you have a right to brag on your falsehood? And people do that, don't they? They're proud of their ignorance, so to speak, which they consider wise. You see that all the time. You hear it. You're thinking, where do these people come from? People are proud of the way they act. Yes, Paul?
Read that verse. He's talking about what they are holding in their heart. Long
Yeah.
before they even say it. He says, if you hold that in your heart,
Yeah.
in fact, even without saying it, it is a lie against the truth.
Right.
Your heart is a lie.
Because it's who you are. It's coming from within. Much like our Christianity needs to come from within. But if it's not, and the problem with these people are, they're also people who can fool you. Because their heart is saying one thing and their mouth is saying, I love you, follow me. You ever hear someone have to always say, I'm not lying? That is a red flag. If someone has to say honest, or any variance of that, and I'm constantly saying, and they're constantly saying, I'm not lying, there might be a problem here. So we need to think about that when you're talking to people.
Double standard.
Double standards, well, it's a false standard. It's really not double because you can't be both. You can't be evil and good. It's one or the other. If you look over to Romans, turn over to Romans chapter 2, talking about these evil hearts in a way that Paul talks about it in Romans 2, verses 8 and 9. It says in verse 8, but for those who are self-seeking and do not obey the truth, but obey unrighteousness, there will be wrath and fury. There will be tribulation and distress for every human being who does evil. First, the Jews first, and also the Greeks. So that's pretty in your face comment. And then James, going back to James, says this in verse 16. In verse 7. Verse 16. Yeah. For where there's jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder. Same thing Paul was saying, and every vile practice. So what do you get out of that? If you're not following God and you're following your own wisdom or the wisdom of the world, here's what we're talking about: the wisdom of God or the wisdom of the world. Once you start getting sucked into the wisdom of the world, you get sucked into a lot of things. The problem is, the deeper and deeper people get sucked into things, the harder and harder it is to get back out.
Right.
The problem is, they leave a path of destruction. A path of problems. One problem leads to the next problem. And then that problem complicates the next problem. And before you know it, they've dug a hole so deep they don't know how to get out of. And their past has painted a picture of them, which is hard to overcome. Not only for them, but for people around them who've seen it. That's how destructive this false doctrine or false self-worth is. I mean, it's hard to come back. And that's why James, and then we read Paul, and turn over also to Galatians chapter 5. 19 through 21, we're going to look at real quick. This is how strong a warning we have throughout the pages of the Bible on this thing. 19, chapter 5 of Galatians, starting with verse 19. Now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, and divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies. Things like this I warn you, as I warned you before, that these who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. Can it get any stronger than that? And over in 2 Thessalonians, we'll look at chapter 2, verses 9 and 10. Second Thessalonians 2, 9 and 10. The coming of lawless one by activity of Satan, with all the power and false signs and wonder, and with all the wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. The message that James is bringing to us here is very strong. We have one of two choices. We can be wise and have wisdom in Christ. Or we can be wise in our own understanding and wisdom like the world. Look around you. Do you want to be like the world? Do you want to condone the things the world is condoning? Not me. Yet we let it creep in. We let it creep in because of the things we're doing. What do you watch on TV? I remember when the real popular series came on of Yellowstone. We were excited. Oh, this is going to be cool. It's filmed right up here. This is really nice. I think we lasted 2 minutes, maybe 5. And the language was so bad, we haven't watched it since. But it has a big, giant following. Every time we go out to Missoula or Hamilton, there's people out there taking pictures in front of the gates. Because we've learned to be programmed to just ignore it and put it in the back of our head and condone it. Don't we? Sometimes we condone the things of the world because we're not wise. Right? We're not wise. You can't look over these things. You've got to stand up for what's right. We just read, including James 4, verses that should make us all tremble a little bit. Because if we are using the wisdom of the world, what's going to happen to us? We're going to perish in hell. Jill?
Well, I think when you have to be aware of these things, because I wasn't aware, I didn't realize that I was sinning. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But then once you become humble, then you become aware through the scriptures. That's where it starts to count. Because I know I'm getting ahead of you on this, but 4:17 and James says, therefore, the one who knows the right thing to do, he does not do it, to him it is sin. So there, I think it's a harsher, could be a harsher judgment on somebody who knows the right thing to do and doesn't do it, and claims to be a Christian, or claims to be wise, or claims to be understanding.
I think, and I don't want to get into that, but a lot of times when people talk about a harsher judgment, I don't know if you can get any harsher than hell.
Well,
I think
that's what I mean.
the difference is once you know better and then you fall in the trap and go to hell, you know what you could have been. That makes it harder.
And I guess
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say.
right. That makes it harder. All of us in here have studied enough about the scriptures to know what we need to be doing. We do. If you don't, see me and we'll set up Bible study. And really, I mean that, because we got one shot at this, guys. In the world, I've watched so many people close to me and otherwise that just get sucked up in their own selfishness, their own pleasures of life, and get so far away they don't know how to come back. And then when you try, what happens? They get angry when you try to help them, because they don't want to hear it, because they struggle getting back. When you've led so much problem, it's like a drug addict. A drug addict has to go through some severe medical treatment and some really hard times to get off the drugs, because they're addicted. Their body goes into convulsions. Their body just almost tears itself up because they're not having those fixes. And it's the same thing with our Christianity. If we let ourselves fall so deep in the hole, it's hard to come back. A lot of reasons is our selfishness, our pride. How hard is it to admit you're wrong? Or how easy is it to admit you're wrong? None of us like to do it. But our life could depend on it. And we need to be careful with that. So it says, verse 17, Jill alluded to it a minute ago, but the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. Now, let's look at that. We're comparing pure and perfect to bitter jealousy on the verses before that. Or gentle and selfishness, open to reason and mercy versus good disorder. And we have good fruits. Remember, James closed out the verses before in chapter, in the same chapter, but 11 and 12. A fig tree does not bring forth olives. A corrupted heart, a bad heart, is not going to bring forth good. If your heart and your mind is not in the right place, it's not going to produce good fruits. But see, the blessing we have here is Christ. Because Christ has given us the avenue of forgiveness. He's given us grace. He's given us salvation. If we're willing to turn loose of our selfish ways and cling to Him. That's awesome. Because I can't do it by myself. None of us can. But we have Christ to do that. To fill in that gap. And verse 18 says, and a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. If you ever notice each section, this is going to lead into the next section. But a good heart, a kind heart, a gentle heart is going to bring forth the harvest of peace. An angry, selfish, bitter heart is not going to produce peace, is it? It's going to produce discord, deception.
You're damaging yourself.
And yeah, Janet.
I was thinking the other day, as I opened my mail, the number of catalogs that are coming.
That time of year.
We are bombarded by visual of things that we think we might have to own. My friends that were talking not long ago were saying, we're so glad we grew up in the age where even Christmas, you didn't think about what you were going to get. You were so glad if you got a pair of new socks or a pair of pajamas or something like that. I don't think so many of our young people have ever experienced that. That's what you get what you get. And not be so jealous of everything you think you should have. But there are so many things out there that are wanging at us, you know, especially at this time of the year.
Right. We lose sight of what's important. I remember growing up, I think I liked getting the Sears catalog more than my Christmas gift. The Christmas catalog. Remember that?
Yes.
I spent hours dreaming in that book. And then I got pajamas.
Hold hands on that one.
My grandmother, bless her heart, thought every year we needed new slippers. When you're 10 years old, just doesn't seem to. I could go to bed in a t-shirt and I'm good. But you're right. The world puts out these temptations of what you need to have. You need to have the best of this, the best of that. And then people go into debt to get it. Of worldly things. And now, what's their focus on? Getting out of debt. Or enjoying the things they just spent money on. And then Christ becomes further and further away. And But this has happened through the ages. This ain't new. People are always distracted by things of the world instead of Christ. You even see David and Bathsheba. His focus wasn't on Christ. It was on worldly gain. Yeah.
I find it ironic. We live in such a selfish and entitled society. And I see it in my career where I would train nurses, and as it's gone down, the entitlement is just outstanding. But it's ironic because we're given this gift that we're literally have been entitled to because of Jesus' sacrifice.
Exactly.
And they want nothing to do with it. They want all these other things that you should give them that they are entitled to. And there's the one thing that they literally are entitled to because of Jesus' sacrifice, and they want nothing to do with it. It's just very strange to me.
It is, and going back, we are a visual, nowadays even more than ever in life, as far as I can tell. We want instant gratification for everything. Me, me, me. My daughter, Kimberly, she's not doing it now for various reasons because the kids needed her more. But she went and got training and was a nurse's aide for a while. And they kind of were laughing at her. The other girls were going, you don't have to be that enthusiastic. But she was caring for everyone she was helping, no matter what the situation was. And so some of them were asking for her. No, have Kim come in. And they're like, when something would go pretty bad, they would be at the station going, flipping a coin, see which one has to go in, and Kim would just go. Because she was there for the people. She wasn't there for the money. She wasn't there for some glorious gain. She was there because she felt, I'm doing this so I can help people. Isn't that a good Christian attitude? What are we here for?
To serve.
What's that? To serve.
To serve.
To help people. We need to care. Our wisdom, our conduct, as James says, needs to show meekness. And if you're being meek, you're showing humbleness and love to somebody. And that's who we need to be. And we need to be careful. Because there's no gray areas, guys. Don't let anyone fool you. When it comes to being a Christian or being of the world, there's no gray area. You can't straddle the fence. You either are or you're not. Jesus makes that very clear. The ones who said, didn't I do all these great things in Matthew for you? Didn't I do all these great things? And Jesus says, depart from me, I know you not. Ye who work iniquity. We're either doing it right or we're doing it wrong. And there's no in between, and we need to be careful with that. We need to live like the last line here is, we need to live so that we are sowing peace, sowing peacefulness. And that's a strong warning closing out this section. We'll start off in any other comment on that last piece. So in chapter 4, again he picks up worldliness. He says, what causes quarrels and fights among you? Is it not that your passions are at war within you? You desire and do not have. You murder, you covet and cannot obtain. You fight and quarrel. What does he mean you do all this and cannot obtain? What do you think that means? People break in and steal. And people are cheating people, robbing, and doing all these things because of these passions. What are they trying to gain?
We're trying to gain happiness.
Trying to gain happiness.
No matter how many things we have, we're not going to be happy because we're going to want more.
If that's your mindset, if your mindset's such that you will rob somebody trying to get what you want, You're never going to find peace and happiness in that, are you? You're never going to find it. And that's what he's saying here. He says, you desire and do not have. He says, and you covet and cannot obtain. You fight and quarrel. Because see, the problem is, these people who are seeking worldly things are never satisfied. Not satisfied. Because that's only temporary. I remember if you ever watch Gunsmoke, which I do, I don't like the way they portrayed the character of Dennis Weaver as Chester. Kind of drives me batty. I remember one particular episode, he was broke. So he went to Matt and asked for money, and Matt gave him whatever it was he gave him. What he do? He goes to the saloon and he gambles it away. So in a short time, he's broke again. Why? Because he was seeking something that probably was not going to happen. You look at these casinos in Vegas, do you think they're losing money? And you're all getting rich? I don't think so.
No, they got it fixed.
I don't think so.
They got it fixed.
But see, that's the way of the world. That's the way of the world. And so here, if you have that desires and passion, he's saying this causes wars. We see it all the time. We see nations and countries and people at wars. We see one-on-one, your neighbors fighting with neighbors or whatever. All because of little dumb quirks. Where we live now, before almost everybody moved out, there was the families there feuded a lot over all kinds of weird stuff. The one house was built with a copper roof, and the rest of them didn't like it because it didn't blend in. Or we don't want you to have cows on your land because it's just going to draw flies and stink. And as petty as that sounds, don't we do that all the time? We get caught up in that. Dumb pride, dumb passions, wanting something that we don't have, coveting, James says, is the cause of wars. And we see that all the time, don't we? All the time. So how do we combat that? It says at the end of verse 2, it says, you do not have because you do not ask. And it says, and you do not receive because you ask wrongly to spend it on your possessions. We talked about this. I talked about this a little bit in my sermon Sunday. Prayer is not a way to gain a new car or to gain worldly possessions, is it? And here, what's James saying? First of all, most of you don't even ask for help. And when you do, it's a selfish act. It's the act of possession. You're wanting something. You want more money. You want whatever. Does God really care how much possessions we have? He tells us that he makes sure that the birds of the field who don't store up, they have plenty of stuff to eat. And that's what's important, isn't it? Our health and our spiritual health is the only two things that really matter in this world. Everything else is just a burden. Yeah.
Well, even if we ask when we're troubled and there's a difficult thing happening and you want it to go away, we have to understand that's the same kind of asking with wrong motives. We need to ask for the ability to accept whatever situation that is God's will.
Right.
And in doing that, I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I know that God's going to give me the ability to be okay with it. Just like Apostle Paul said, he had learned the secret of being content with much. or with little,
Right.
or whatever circumstance he was in. And it is I think that's the attitude that he's talking about, is God's will be done, not mine.
Yep. And you know, Paul's a prime example. He went from being a leader in a Roman where he probably had everything, servants, everything he probably had, to nothing, to a tent builder. When he needed money, he worked for it. Just enough to get by with. Yet today, very few people are interested in being content. They're always seeking it. And they never learn to be it. So, it says, verse 4 says, "You adulterous people, do you not know that friendship with the world is enemy with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend to the world makes himself an enemy of God." So, he's really driving this point home, and I don't want this to sound like a downer lesson, but he's warning us that we have a choice. If we decide to be of this world, we're not of God. And if we decide to be of God, we're not of this world. We live in it, but we need not to conform to it. Jill?
Well, I think it's, that's one thing I've tried to explain to some members of the community, the Amish, where they isolate themselves basically from the world. It's not that you're to be part of the world, but not of the evil of the world.
Right.
I mean, God created this beautiful place, and that's all of us, everything. So not to be a part of that evil part of the world. Am I saying that right?
Uh-huh. I mean, we live here, but we're not to be conformed. Yubi?
On that adulterous thing, ye adulterous, American Standard has a marginal note. It said, that is who breaks your marriage vow to God.
Exactly. That makes it strong, doesn't it?
Real strong.
What are we? The bride of Christ, right? And being of the world makes us an adultery situation to Christ.
Talking to Brenda.
Yes, he is. So, we've got a lot to chew on here, and we're out of time. Gets away real quick here. But the positive side of this is we do have a choice. I want to leave with a positive note. We have every opportunity to dig out of those holes that we get into in life and cling to Christ. And if we do that, we have a home with Him in heaven. Something that is so glorious that we can't even hardly imagine.
As he's fixing to give us the recipe for being humble, which is the key
Yep,
to all of this.
exactly. So we'll pick up on this next week. Appreciate all your comments, and thank you very much.